Hey guys, I hope you're well. So in this video, I wanted to talk about tracking devices for your camera gear and equipment. So in terms of tracking devices, you can obviously use them to track whatever you want. And when it comes to camera gear and equipment, I think it's even more important, especially if you're traveling, renting out gear, or just for regular shoots. And considering that tracking devices aren't really all that expensive these days, I think it is definitely worth the investment. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, just to clarify, I'm not talking about GPS trackers or units that require SIM cards, as these are generally more expensive, bulkier, and just not as easy to use. I'm specifically talking about tracking devices that use crowdsourced networks like Apple and Google's Find My networks, or long-range wide area networks. There's a number of popular brands you might have heard of like Tile or Chipolo, which I have used before, but I don't recommend these particular brands as Tile is Bluetooth only, so only reaches up to 200 to 300 meters, so anything beyond that is not going to work. And even though Chipolo can use Apple and Google's networks, there's been reports of it being inconsistent or flat out not working with either of those networks. So it shouldn't be a surprise that Airtags are the most common and popular trackers, and I use a number of these myself, which are great. They're affordable, and with the billions of Apple users, coverage isn't much of a problem. The thing I'm not a huge fan of is the form factor. Although it is quite small, the shape and roundness of it just isn't ideal for some applications. In terms of integrating Airtags with cameras, there are a few brands that have specifically made attachments to hold Airtags in, like SmallRig and Nanook, which conceals the Airtags and requires screws to open. As well as CosmoCap and Polar Pro, who offer body caps with a hidden storage compartment for an Airtag. However, these can still be easily taken off, so the offerings from SmallRig seem to be the best in terms of security. A particular tracker that I've been using is by a company called Rolling Square, who are a Swiss company that makes some very nicely designed gadgets like chargers, USB cables, and phone and tablet holders. And they've also won a few design awards as well. I first found them through a Kickstarter campaign they were running when they launched the first version of the AirCard, which leveraged Apple's Find My network. And the thing I immediately liked about it was that it was thin and could fit perfectly into my wallet. It is also louder than an AirTag and has a QR code and NFC tag that you can use to create a digital ID with your contact details through Sherr.it, which I'll go through later. This AirCard unfortunately doesn't come with a rechargeable battery, however it does last 2.5 years, and Rolling Square does offer a 50% discount for a replacement unit after sending the old unit back to them. And just last year in October, they launched another Kickstarter campaign with the new and improved version of the AirCard called the AirCard Pro. And additionally, they introduced another tracking device called the AirNotch Pro. As I was a Kickstarter backer for this campaign, I did also get special offers for some additional items like a lanyard, pouch, and multi-tool, which I purchased. All of the items come in packaging that is recyclable and small, so that's always a good thing in terms of reducing waste and sustainability. So with the new AirCard Pro, there are two major updates compared to the original card. And the first one is that they now come in two versions, one for Apple's network and one for Google's network, which is differentiated by color, black for Apple and white for Google, with the design being identical on both of the cards. In terms of the differences to the original card, the size is pretty much the same, with the corners being slightly less rounded, and they've gotten rid of the tempered glass and opted to go with fiberglass in this version. They've also added an on-off switch this time round, and removed the NFC tag on the back, which is for the second major update, and that is wireless charging. So these should work with pretty much any wireless charging device, and is stated to last around 14 months when fully charged, making these a much more appealing option than the original. Connecting to either Apple's Find My network and Google's Find My device network works just the same as with connecting any other device. But I did find the Google one took a little longer to find and connect to the device, but that could also just be my particular phone. The alert sounds on both cards do play a different tune, but both are just as equally as loud. So as mentioned previously, Rolling Square did also come out with a tag version called the AirNotch Pro. And this device is rated as IP68, waterproof and impact proof. And just feeling it in my hand, it's extremely sturdy and would take a lot for it to break. It does also take two CR2032 batteries, but this will last you around 20 months. It also features 360-degree omnidirectional speakers and glows in the dark as well. Just like with the Google AirCard Pro, I did struggle initially to get my phone to connect to the device, but after trying a few more times, it was eventually able to connect. It is possible that this is just my phone that has signal issues, or maybe iPhones just have better connectivity. I did also find it hard to turn off the device, as you needed to press it 5 times in a row, but it had to be really precise, so it did take several tries, whereas it was much easier with the AirCard Pro. In terms of working with the Apple and Google networks, all the units have been working perfectly for me without any issues, and I even recently took them on a short trip to Hong Kong, where I tested them in a couple of locations and at my hotel. And I didn't encounter any issues the few days that I was there. So the big advantage of Airtags is its precision finding feature, which unfortunately for the AirCard Pro and AirNotch Pro don't have. And this is because Apple doesn't allow any third-party developers to have this feature, and they would also need to have the U1 chip, which is also proprietary to Apple. The Google versions, on the other hand, can utilize Google's Find Nearby feature, which kind of acts like the precision finding feature, although it is not as precise as AirTags, as they use both Bluetooth and ultra wideband, but it does do a pretty good job in most situations. I did also want to quickly go over the other items from Rolling Square that I got. Starting with the pouch, this is really for the AirCard Pros, and it does come with a couple of stick-on Velcros as well, if you wanted to attach it to things like a laptop. And the cards themselves do fit really snugly in the pouch, so they're not likely to fall out. And next is the multi-tool, which does also have a QR code to link to your profile. You can use it to measure things, cut wires and open boxes, as well as to tighten tripod plates or screws, but most importantly, to open bottles with. And last but not least, there's the lanyard, which, if I'm being totally honest, I don't think I'd really have much use for, but it is actually really nice and sturdy. And it has this really unique design where you pull on this cord to detach it, but then it just snaps back together using a magnet, but it locks in place, so that it can only detach when you pull the cord, which I haven't seen this before. It also comes with this separate QR sticker, which, just like with the other products, you can create and link to your profile through Sherr.it, so that whenever someone scans any of your devices, your profile will show up, which is great if you've lost those items or just want to quickly share your details with others. So as great as all of these devices are with being able to work with Apple and Google's networks, they still have the same issue of alerting others when these trackers are moving with them. So when it comes to things being stolen, unless you have locks on your bags or cases, these trackers will likely eventually be found. But it's still better to have these than not, and they'd still be good for finding misplaced items. And you do also get alerted if they do become separated from you while on a shoot. So when I was researching different tracking devices, I came upon something called LoRa, which stands for long range. And this is used by many different industries and businesses to track and monitor their assets with a whole range of different applications. It utilizes the internationally recognized standard called LoRaWAN, which is the long-range wide area network. And there are both centralized and decentralized networks available, which uses gateways to communicate with devices. So without going into too much detail, basically devices that use LoRa technology and LoRaWAN networks don't rely on Wi-Fi or cellular networks, which have coverage limitations and higher costs, but rather it uses low-powered long-range radio frequencies and includes geolocation without the need for GPS, although it can still use Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to help extend its capabilities. There are a number of companies that make devices utilizing LoRa technology, and one such company is Seeed Studio. In particular, the tracker that they sell is called the Sensecap T1000, and there's actually 3 different models, the T1000E and the T1000A and B. The E version is different because it communicates directly to other users who also have the device, and uses a mesh network called Meshtastic, where they can communicate through the Meshtastic app in remote or off-grid locations. So it's more suitable for hikers, festival goers, and emergency responders, where mobile signal or internet may not be available. It can only also last around 2 days, so it's not ideal for tracking items over large distances or for longer periods. The A and B devices, on the other hand, do use the LoRaWAN network, so is better for tracking items. The difference between the two is that the A version also has temperature, light, and motion sensors, if that's something you need for whatever you're tracking or monitoring. I personally went with the B model as I didn't need the temperature, light, and motion sensors, and it was also the cheapest of the 3. The overall design is pretty basic, with only a button and LED light on the front and the charging pins on the back. Charging to full doesn't take too long and is stated to last around 4 months, although this will vary greatly depending on how you configure the device. In terms of size, it is thicker than the AirCards by about double, but is still slightly less than an AirTag, and flatter, so it can still slip into most places. Now, when it comes to actually connecting and using the device, you first need to download the SenseCraft app, which was previously called the Sensecap Mate app. So I'm letting you know right now that it definitely takes more of a setup than with any of the other devices. I wouldn't say it's overly complicated, but there are more things to configure and understand, so it's definitely worth reading the documentation and watching the video tutorials from Seeed Studio. I previously mentioned that LoRaWAN uses a centralized network server, which is standard for most deployments. However, it can also be integrated into decentralized networks. In this setup, gateways or hotspot devices are deployed by individuals, enabling users of tracking devices like the T1000 to transmit and relay data through a decentralized infrastructure. And there are currently over 170 centralized and decentralized network providers operating worldwide, with the largest decentralized one being the Helium network. And the whole reason I'm telling you this is because you do need to choose a network in order to use the T1000, and the Helium network is the biggest, decentralized, and most recommended one to use with this device. However, unlike with Apple and Google networks, a decentralized network does require payment, either with a pay-as-you-go system using cryptocurrency or through a subscription. And you might immediately be put off by this, however, the Helium network's cryptocurrency, called Helium Network Tokens, which converts into data credits, is fixed at 0.00001 US dollars, meaning you get 100,000 data credits per $1 US. And just to put this into perspective, if you set the uplink of the T1000 to every 60 minutes, so how often it will send an update, for an entire year, it will cost less than $1. And if you set it to every 5 minutes, it comes to just over $1, making the actual costs extremely low. Seeed Studio also offer a subscription plan through the SenseCraft app, which is what I'm currently using, as it's very affordable and already set up through the app, and just as a means for me to first test the device and the network. I can always choose to set up and use Helium network tokens later down the track, if I wanted to. There is one very important consideration to make before deciding whether or not to get this device, and that is whether your country or specific region even has Helium network coverage. And you can check this by going to the official Helium Explorer website, which lists all of the registered hotspots globally. However, if you change over to the coverage map, some of the areas don't actually show any coverage, even if there are hotspots showing. And for this, you would need to go to the Helium Mappers website instead, which does list verified real-world coverage where hotspots have successfully picked up signals. This is a community-driven website that was created to address the gap in verifying real-world coverage. So both websites are useful, but the Mappers website is more accurate in terms of network coverage data. When it comes to actual usage, for the most part, it does work. However, you do need to be within range of a hotspot to link and remain active, or else the LED will keep flashing to find a connection, and you only see details from your last location update. For me, because I don't have any hotspots within direct range of my house, I can only connect to the device once I leave my home, so it really just depends on your specific area whether there's good coverage or not. There is one strange quirk that seems to happen quite often, and it's when I'm on the main map and there's no location indicator showing up. It only appears when I press on the history tab, so I'm not completely sure what's happening here. And just quickly touching upon the settings again, there isn't too many things to change, but you can adjust things like how often to send an update or heartbeat, which just checks if the device is still operational, and things like which technologies should be used to pinpoint GPS coordinates, and how long it should scan the area for a signal. And again, Seed Studio does offer a wiki page and documentation, so it's best to refer to that to get all of that information. So when it comes to other options than the ones I've reviewed here, Pebblebee make a card, clip, and tag as well, which can work with either Apple or Google networks, but not simultaneously. And Eufy have a Smart Track card and link, which only uses the Apple's network, as well as Orbit, who have a key finder and a card that works with Apple as well. And there's currently not enough information surrounding the AirTag 2, but it is rumored to likely be keeping the same shape and size. So if you are considering getting a tracker for your equipment, I think that the original AirCard is still a great option if you mainly use Apple and want to save a little bit of money, especially if you plan on buying multiple cards. You do obviously miss out on the rechargeable battery aspect, but 2.5 years is still a pretty long runtime, and you do get 50% off when you do need to replace them, or you can choose to upgrade to the new AirCard Pro with 50% off of the original AirCard retail price. My guess is that they'll eventually discontinue the original AirCards, but when that will actually happen is anyone's guess. The new and improved AirCard Pro and AirNotch Pro, on the other hand, does offer more compatibility with both Apple and Google networks, making it a more logical choice, as well as incorporating a wireless rechargeable battery, making it even more convenient. The Apple version does lose out on the precision finding feature, unfortunately, but the Android version does leverage the Find Nearby feature for better precision. In terms of the Sensecap T1000-B, it does work, but does take a little bit more effort to configure and does cost a little bit of money, although I do think it is a pretty good option and is also more discreet than the others, as it doesn't trigger any alerts to potential thieves, but does have a couple of quirks when using the app. If the size and shape of Airtags isn't a concern for you, or you really need the precision finding feature from Apple, then sticking with just Airtags is perfectly fine. But overall, I think all of these trackers are great and can definitely complement each other, so there's no reason you couldn't use all of these together, considering how inexpensive they are. So I hope this has been helpful, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.